Hello, my wonderfully drowsy time travelers, my fellow lovers of slow-moving history and stories that melt your mind into dreams. Before we begin our journey to the distant past, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If these sleepy stories help you drift off, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us create more content to lull restless minds to sleep. And if you're feeling extra cozy, leave us a comment. Tell us how long you lasted before dozing off. We love reading your experiences. Now, find your most comfortable position. Let your eyelids grow heavy and allow my voice to guide you into relaxation. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a vast, untouched wilderness. The sun has just begun to dip behind the hills. Its soft orange light stretches long shadows across ancient earth. There is silence, not from absence, but from peace, a hush draped like velvet over the landscape. And there, in the distance, stone, layer upon layer, arch upon arch, a road leading to nowhere and everywhere at once, worn by centuries, yet still standing, still holding, a Roman road, one of many, made of dust, rock, and something more, something heavier, something nearly eternal, concrete. Not the kind you see today, not grey slurry poured by machines. No, this was Roman concrete, opus cementitium, a recipe lost for centuries and only recently whispered back into the ears of the curious. But why? Why did they use so much of it? Why did this one substance shape the bones of an empire? And how did it last this long? To answer that, dear dreamer, we must first slow everything down, even time itself, and step into the world of the early Roman builders. The smell of mortar is thick in the air, not unpleasant, but earthy, like wet volcanic ash, stone dust, and lime. It's warm, the kind of warmth that clings to the skin, not just from the sun, but from the breath of stone, baking slowly under the Mediterranean sky. The Romans did not invent concrete, but they understood it, they tamed it, and they used it to build things that felt impossible. They needed it desperately, because Rome was bursting. By the time the first century dawned, the city was swelling with people, tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, spilling into hills, valleys, and riverbanks. Wood was scarce, heavy stone was laborious, and fire had a habit of swallowing entire neighborhoods. Concrete, however, could resist it, bend to form, and stand the test of time. The ingredients were simple, so simple they feel like whispers from the earth itself. Lime, water, and a strange, sandy powder gathered from volcanic regions near Naples. Pozzolana, volcanic ash, fine, coal, dry, and when mixed with water and lime, It hardened into something more resilient than any brick. It set slowly, carefully, and once cured, could stand against centuries of wind, rain, salt, even the sea. The Romans began experimenting, pouring it into wooden frames, letting it cradle bricks, stone, and marble. And then they built upward, outward, everywhere. Market, baths, temples, theaters that could hold thousands, domes that seemed to float in the sky, and aqueducts so silent and sturdy that water still trickles through some of them today. What made it so strong and so enduring? Even now, scientists carefully chip away at samples, trying to understand how Roman concrete heals itself, resists salt, refuses to crumble. But there's more to it than chemistry, more than lime and ash, more than sand and gravel. It was vision. The Romans didn't just want to build things. They wanted to shape the world, to carve order into nature, to make the ground itself obey. And so they turned to concrete, because it was flexible, malleable, strong beneath weight, and soft enough to dream in curves. That's what they did. They dreamed in concrete, while the Greeks carved, and the Egyptians stacked. The Romans poured. They filled walls with it, lined docks with it, breached valleys, anchored harbors. And then they looked at the sky and built Pantheon, a dome of such quiet majesty that it still stands over 1900 years later, unaffected by time, unyielding to gravity. Inside, it feels like standing beneath the lid of the world. Cool air drifts in through the oculus, the circular eye at its peak, a perfect circle cut through the heavens. It has no steel, no iron supports, just concrete, layered, shaped, and trusted. But why? Why did they trust it so deeply? Why pour it into the foundation of everything they loved? Perhaps it was because they had seen what stone alone could not do. Stone crumbled, stone cracked, stone took time. But concrete, it flowed, it adapted, gave rise to imagination. And for the Romans, that mattered more than beauty, more than tradition, more than permanence. They wanted power, presence, and possibility. Concrete offered all three, and so they built, until the hills were carved with terraces, until the coastline bristled with harbors, until cities rose, not just in Italy, but across the known world. You can still see it today in quiet ruins, half-submerged breakwaters, and lonely pillars standing in forgotten fields. You can run your fingers along its surface, feel the coarse texture, the smoothness where centuries of rain have polished it like glass. And if you close your eyes, you might just hear it. The echo hammers, the murmur of workers, the hiss of lime meeting water, a sigh from the past, The Romans may have vanished, but their concrete dreams remain, still standing, still holding, still whispering. But was it just practicality? Just function over form? Or was there something deeper? Some secret in the mix? Some forgotten wisdom? Some lost method that made it truly eternal? In our next journey, we'll travel deeper into this mystery, into the crumbling vaults and the sunken docks, to uncover what the Romans may have known and what we might have forgotten. For now, rest. Let your thoughts settle like ancient dust. Let the steady weight of history soothe your mind, and drift softly, quietly, into dreams built not of marble, but of concrete, beneath the surface, where most eyes don't look, where the feet of centuries have passed overhead. That's where the true genius of Roman concrete lies, not in the gleaming facade, but in what lies beneath them, in the walls filled with invisible strength, in ports long swallowed by sea, in places that should have crumbled, but haven't. Let us wander there for a while, quietly, softly. Let the dust rise gently from the floor of memory. You see, Roman concrete was more than just a mix. It was a philosophy of building. They didn't simply use it because it was cheap. They used it because it worked with time. Modern concrete, it grows tired. Water seeps in, cracks form, steel inside begins to rust. But Roman concrete, it ages differently. Some of their sea walls are still standing even after 2,000 years of waves, salt, dust, storms, erosion. Why? Because of something unexpected. The secret lies in how it reacts over time. Pozzolanic ash, especially from volcanic regions, like Campi Flegrei near Naples, has a peculiar gift. When mixed with seawater, yes, salt water, a strange thing begins to happen. Instead of crumbling, it gets stronger, not weaker, but stronger. Tiny cracks form, as they always do, but inside those cracks, crystals begin to grow. Aluminum, tobamorite, and other rare minerals. They grow slowly, gently, filling the gaps, locking pieces tighter together, like nature itself, quietly repairing the wounds of stone. It's almost as if the concrete is alive, not breathing, but healing. And that's the wonder of it. Roman concrete doesn't fight time. It works with it. It embraces it. And in doing so, it endures it. But how did they know this? Was it an accident? A fortunate discovery? Or did they somehow understand? The Roman builders were not scientists, not in the way we mean today. They didn't have microscopes, no labs, no precise measuring instruments, but they had something better: observation and time. They watched the materials, watched how one batch aged faster than another, how one wall held longer, to rain, how one port resisted the pull of the sea. They learned, took note, refined. Their texts don't describe exact recipes, but they do offer clues. Vitruvius, a Roman architect in the 1st century BCE, wrote of building materials, of lime, of ash, of mixing ratios. He spoke of how volcanic ash, when used properly, created a stone that becomes stronger with age. That phrase, so soft, so simple, hides the heartbeat of an empire's construction. They were not guessing. They were listening to the earth, to water, to time, and they built accordingly. Now, let's walk into the heart of a Roman harbor. The air smells of salt, of fish, of rope, left too long in the sun. You feel the breeze on your skin, gentle, but persistent. The sea presses constantly on the shore, hungry, eroding. Ah, and yet, here stand the remains of Roman piers, unyielding. They built them by dropping massive wooden frames into the sea, filled them with their volcanic concrete. The water foamed, the mixture hissed, and then it set underwater. It cured not in spite of the sea, but because of it. No modern concrete does this. Not naturally, not without special coatings or treatments, but the Romans, they knew which ashes to use, which limes, which ratios. Their knowledge was not mystical, but it was rare, a kind of practical magic drawn from the slow passage of generations. They didn't rush. They built with patience and with trust in their materials. That patience is etched into their buildings, into the smooth curves of the Pantheon dome, into the hollow shell of the Colosseum, into the buried roads that still run straight beneath cities today. Roman concrete became invisible, hidden behind brick or stone or tile, but it was always there, the skeleton, the unseen muscle beneath the skin of empire. And so, as Rome expanded, concrete went with it, to Gaul, to Britannia, to North Africa, to the furthest wind-swept edge of empire. Each fortress, each bathhouse, each forum poured and shaped in the same slow way, the same volcanic memory, moved by human hands. But then Rome fell, and with it the recipe was lost, forgotten. The ash pits closed, the lime kilns went cold, the builders died, and their secrets drifted into silence. Medieval builders still used stone, still mixed mortars, but they didn't understand what the Romans had known, and so they didn't pour. They stacked, they carved, they returned to weight instead of flow. For centuries, concrete became lesser, weaker, gone, unremarkable, until the 19th century, when Portland cement was born. Modern concrete, faster, cheaper, reliable, but not eternal. It sets quickly, hardens rapidly, but cracks easily, and ages poorly. Compared to Rome's recipe, it is a candle beside a lantern, and so modern scientists have begun studying ancient ruins, not just for history, but for answers. Tiny samples, scraped gently from sea walls, tested, scanned, mapped atom by atom. What they found is remarkable. The Romans weren't just mixing powder and water. They were creating an environment within the concrete itself, a tiny world where time works differently, where minerals shift, grow, heal. In 2023, researchers discovered that the ancient builders intentionally added chunks of lime that hadn't been fully mixed. Quicklime, not slaked first, not dissolved. Why? Because when water later touched those pieces, they created micro cracks that resealed themselves. It was a design, not an accident. Concrete wasn't just a material. It was a system, kind of sleeping intelligence. And this is where the mystery returns. How could they know? How could ancient builders, with no microscopes, no formulas, no digital models, understand something we're only now beginning to grasp? Perhaps, dear listener, perhaps it was time itself. They built slowly, they watched, they remembered, and above all, they respected the materials. No rush, no shortcuts, only patience, observation, and trust in the earth's wisdom. It's something we've nearly forgotten in our hurry to build taller, faster, cheaper. As we look again to the domes, to the roads, to the walls, still standing, we remember that strength is not just in hardness, but in harmony with time, with water, with ash and stone. That was the Roman way. And that is why they used so much concrete, not because it was simple, but because it endured, because it taught them, because it gave shape to their ambition and to their empire. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and your thoughts soften into mist, let the whispers of Roman dust carry you deeper into sleep. The sound of lapping waves, the warmth of sun on old stone, the gentle hiss of lime in water. Let it all blend into silence and stone and dreams that do not crack. Good night, traveler, and may your rest be as strong and lasting as Roman concrete. And so we return once more to the silent weight of stone and the ancient whisper of lime and ash. The world around us is still, softened as if covered in a thin veil of dust. Dust not from decay, but from memory. In part 1, we wandered along the edges of Roman roads and stood in awe beneath domes poured by forgotten hand. In part 2, we went deeper beneath the surface to the sea walls that should have collapsed, to the cracks that healed themselves, to the strange alchemy of Roman patience and volcanic ash. And now we drift further beyond mortar and walls to something even more enduring than concrete itself. The Roman mind, the way they saw the world, the way they built their world. Because to understand why Romans used so much concrete, we must understand how they thought. They didn't just pour foundations, they poured belief into every arch, every road, every port and platform. To them, concrete was not only material, it was a tool of order, and Rome loved order, perhaps more than anything else. In the wild lands they conquered, they found nature in its rawest form, uneven, crumbling, shifting, and they didn't merely adapt to it, they reshaped it. Concrete allowed them to do that, to flatten marshes, to build roads across ravines, to tame the wildness beneath their feet. It wasn't about luxury. It wasn't even always about beauty. It was about control. The Romans believed deeply in structure, in hierarchy, in roads that all led back to Rome, and with concrete, they could impose that structure anywhere. It hardened like a law, set like a command, and once in place, it stayed. So imagine, now, a hilltop in Gaul, dense with trees, wind-swept. All quiet, and one day, the sound of tools, the rumble of carts, the smoke of lime kilns drifting into the sky. Within weeks, the trees are cleared, the ground leveled, and at the center, a foundation is poured, a fortress, or a bathhouse, a milestone tower, all shaped from the same slow, gray slurry that once flowed in Rome. It spreads like an idea, one that cannot be shaken loose by rain or time. The Romans had no intention of temporary settlements. They built like they meant to stay. Because they did, they believed in the eternity of their empire, and concrete made that dream feel real. Now, picture yourself walking down one of those ancient roads. Odilus walam atanti lia si. It's warm. The stones beneath your feet are smooth, softened by centuries. You run your fingers along a wall beside you. It feels cool, coarse, textured like time itself. Inside that wall, a core of Roman concrete. And it's here that we begin to understand something deeper. They didn't just build on the land, they merged with it. Concrete was their way of fusing human will with nature's materials. Volcanic ash, crushed stone, river, gravel, sand, all blended with lime fire and water into something neither natural nor artificial, but something between, something Roman. And this mixture, it didn't just hold up cities, it held up beliefs, customs, culture. Let's rest for a moment beneath an archway. The shade is cool here. Birdsong filters down from the roofline. The air smells faintly of moss, earth, a little bit of iron. Look up, and you'll see what made Roman architecture so different. Curves, vaults, domes, all of which required concrete. Stone alone could not be shaped so easily, could not bend, could not flow into these forms. The arch, the vault, the dome, all Roman marvels, made possible by this humble grey mixture. And these weren't just artistic choices, they were practical. A dome distributes weight, an arch transfers stress, a vault opens space. With concrete, you could do all three without columns, without beams, without fear. Even the famed baths of Rome, vast and echoing, owe their existence to concrete. They required massive open spaces, vaulted ceilings, endless chambers for steam, heat, and water. All of it was shaped with concrete, not as a decoration, but as essence. And what of the aqueduct? Those gentle stone giants that carried water across valleys and plains. They too were filled with concrete, lined with it, strengthened by it, because water, while soft, is relentless, and the Romans knew to carry water across distance, you needed something just as relentless. So they poured and shaped and trusted that what they built would last beyond them, and it did. But like all things, even Roman concrete has its limits. Some structures collapsed, some roads cracked, some walls crumbled beneath centuries of neglect, because no material is truly eternal. But that's not the point. The point is that they tried. With everything they built, they reached for something more, and concrete gave them the means to try, the means to rise, to organize, to express, to endure, not just physically, but culturally. Culturally. Philosophically, their cities, their systems, their laws, all embedded in the mortar of their world. And so, when we walk through the ruins today, we're not just seeing buildings. We're seeing thoughts made solid, a worldview poured into form, and still standing, still speaking, still teaching, even now, even in sleep. And that, perhaps, is the real reason they used so much of it. Because concrete, unlike wood or clay or straw, could outlive the man who poured it. It could hold memory, preserve intent, become history itself. And as your thoughts settle, as your breath slows, and your body grows heavy like sun-warmed stone, let yourself drift past arches and domes, past lime kilns and seawalls, past the quiet genius of a civilization that didn't just build, but poured its soul into the earth. Sleep now, traveler. Let Roman dust carry you. Let the memory of slow curing stone cradle your dreams. Let your thoughts settle into forms that last, because what the Romans gave us wasn't just buildings, it was a rhythm, patience, a way to endure. And that rhythm, so quiet, so ancient, is still echoing, even now, even in sleep. And so, we continue wandering, not away from the story, but deeper into it, not toward new questions, but toward the quiet roots of old ones. Why did the Romans use so much concrete, not just for domes, or roads, or bridges, but everywhere, in temples, in bathhouses, in aqueducts, in walls, both grand and ordinary, even in their tombs? And now, with your mind resting lightly on the edge of sleep, let us walk softly into the final places where Roman concrete reveals its purpose, the places where it was not only a tool, but a message, because the more you look, the more you realize Roman concrete was not just about function, it was about legacy. Let us begin beneath the earth, in the catacombs, those long, cool corridors beneath ancient cities, carved into soft rock, winding endlessly, walls lined with burial niches, candles flickering faintly, silence hanging thick as dust. And yet, within many of those walls, you'll find layers of concrete protecting the chambers, supporting the ceilings, preserving the memories of those buried within. Because the Romans understood something that we often forget. Concrete is not only for building upward, it's for keeping, for enclosing, for holding the past, even after the present has faded. Their tombs, even the humble ones, were often sealed with it, not because it was beautiful, but because it lasted, and that lasting was part of the Roman soul. Now, let us move, not backward, but forward, into the city again. You are walking now through an ancient Roman insula, a city block, a structure once filled with shops and apartments above. You can still feel its presence, even if most of it has crumbled. At the heart of these buildings, Roman concrete, hidden beneath brick facades, poured between stone walls, used to anchor staircases, support balconies. The Romans used concrete not just for greatness, but for daily life. They weren't precious with it. They didn't reserve it for emperors or gods. They built their world with it, their entire world. And that may be the most profound answer to our question. Why did they use so much of it? Because it worked. It worked for temples, and for toilet, for basilicas, and for bakeries. It was the one material that could meet them at every scale, from aqueduct to arch, from cistern to ceiling. And no, let's pause, sit near a crumbling piece of that world, a step, half buried in soil, softened by time. Run your fingers across its surface. It's coarse, but not jagged, smooth, in a way only time can make something smooth. A mixture of crushed terracotta, broken tile, ash, and ancient gravel, each particle placed with care, each pore made by hand. Concrete, in this way, was also memory. You can still see the outlines of trowels, the faint marks of molds. These aren't just stones. They're fossils of action, of effort, of intent. Every layer poured was a layer of Roman life. And as we drift further still, let us pause at one more place, a harbor, now submerged, its outlines faint beneath the waves. The years are gone to the eye, but beneath the surf, fragments remain, concrete that hasn't fallen, that still clings to its shape. Centuries after the empire fell, the sea cannot dissolve it. Salt cannot eat through it. Why? Because the Romans built it to last, but not through force, through chemistry, through patience. They used volcanic ash that reacted with the seawater. They created conditions for crystal growth. They allowed time itself to become part of the structure. And even now, researchers are diving, scraping, studying, trying to understand what Rome knew and what we forgot. Some are even using those ancient recipes again in modern marine construction, in sustainable building projects. The old ways coming quietly back. Isn't that the final answer, perhaps? That Roman concrete wasn't about the past. It was always about the future, about what would remain, what would stand, what would be rediscovered, even now, under the whisper of your breath, beneath the settling weight of your body. As you rest deeper into sleep, it remains under roads, under ruins, under cities, still there, still Roman, still strong. They used so much of it, not to impress us, but to outlast us. And they did, so as your eyes flutter, and the last images of this ancient world soften into mist. Remember this, the strength of Rome was not in marble, not in sword, not in gold. It was in powdered ash and lime and still water and time, and in the quiet belief that what is poured with care may one day become eternal. Sleep well, traveler, and may your dreams set slowly, cure gently, and last long after you've forgotten them. Still with us, gentle dreamer, let the weight of history settle softly again as we continue our slow descent through the long cured layers of Roman memory. In part 4, we wandered through crumbling stairwells, sunken harbors, sealed tombs, and quiet city blocks, and we saw so clearly that concrete was not simply a Roman material. It was a language, a way of writing permanence into the land, of etching will into the ground. But here, as we reach the final stretch of this journey, one more quiet thought lingers. What happened after the Romans disappeared? The empire fell. The emperors faded. The roads broke. The aqueducts cracked. And the knowledge, that slow, humble mastery of volcanic ash and time, was forgotten. So now, in the hush between stories, let us drift through the loss before we return to the rediscovery. The decline came slowly, not in one blow, but like twilight dimming the sky. By the 5th century, Rome had split west and east, and the Western Empire, where the grandest concrete structures had been built, began to erode, not just politically, but practically. The lime kilns cooled, the ash pits sat unused. The laborers who once knew how to mix pozzolana and lime with purpose were gone, and those who remained had more urgent needs. They built smaller, simpler, built with brick, not with timber, with what they could find. They still used mortar, yes. They still repaired walls, but the secret, the alchemy of Roman concrete, slipped from hand to hand until no one remembered why the seawalls had never crumbled, or why the Pantheon dome had never cracked. And for over 1,000 years, the world forgot how the Romans had poured buildings like water, how they had shaped domes that defied time, how they had crafted marine structures that laughed in the face of salt and storm. It was all still there, still standing, but no longer understood, like a message in a forgotten tongue, visible, tangible, but unreadable. And yet, the concrete waited beneath the cities that rose atop the ruins, waited beneath fields reclaimed by grass, waited at the bottom of harbors where fish swam through broken vaults. It waited and endured until curiosity returned. Centuries passed, and slowly the old ways were uncovered again. Not all at once, not completely, but little by little. A puzzle began to take shape. Engineer, architects, geologists, historians, all drawn to the same question. How did they do it? How did the Romans build things that refused to die? And so the studies began. Small samples chipped from ruins. Thin slices studied under microscopes. Ashes analyzed. Lime particles examined. It was like digging through time itself. In the early 20th century, concrete came back into fashion, but it wasn't Roman. It was modern, quicker, cheaper, made with Portland cement, functional but flawed. Modern concrete hardens fast, but over time it weakens, cracks, rots from within. Reinforced with steel, it's strong until the steel rusts. Roman concrete, it gets stronger, especially when exposed to the sea. Modern builders couldn't replicate it, not at first, because the secret wasn't in what the Romans used. It was in how they used it, how they let time become a partner. And so, in recent decades, researchers began to mimic the past. They returned to Pozzolana, that fine volcanic ash from Naples. They studied lime, not fully slaked, but quick, reactive. They tried replicating Roman mixtures, and slowly they began to understand. Roman concrete was not a static material. It was alive, in a sense, a system, responsive. It didn't merely resist the elements, it welcomed them. Let water enter, let crystals grow, let fractures heal. In one study, in Roman concrete was shown to seal itself when re-exposed to seawater, like skin, like bark, like something that remembered. And so, in the early 21st century, we find ourselves looking back to move forward. Some modern engineers are beginning to adopt ancient principles, not to recreate Roman cities, but to build new ones that last longer, need fewer repairs, resist erosion, coexist with time. Isn't it strange that the future of construction might be hidden in the dust of collapsed empires? Isn't it beautiful? Because the Romans didn't set out to leave behind a puzzle. They weren't trying to impress the far future. They were simply building in the best way they knew how, with patience, with attention, with a kind of respect for the materials under their feet. And maybe in the quiet of that respect, they found something we lost. Not just a recipe, but a rhythm of building with time, with nature, instead of against it. So perhaps the real lesson is not how to copy Roman concrete, but how to think like the Romans, how to listen to the earth, to mix with intention, to trust slow processes, to pour something not just for ourselves, but for those who will walk above it long after we're gone. And now, as you breathe deeply, as your body rests heavy in your sheets, let these final thoughts settle gently like ash in water. The Romans used so much concrete because they believed in the long path, the long view, the quiet permanence. They weren't just building cities, they were writing stories in stone, in silence, in patience. And whether we remember their names or not, we walk on their roads, we study their ruins, we rest beneath their domes, still standing, still teaching. So sleep now on a foundation of memory, of dust and fire, water and lime. Let your dreams be slow curing. Let them heal as they drift, and let the wisdom of Roman concrete keep you anchored until morning, still drifting with us, dreamer, still walking the quiet ruins of time, where lime and ash sleep beneath your thoughts. Let's continue gently, not to repeat, but reveal, because though we've wandered far, there is one more path we must follow, one final corridor in the temple of understanding, not of how they made the concrete, but of how it made them, because Roman concrete didn't just shape walls, it shaped behavior, routines, society, And once we begin to notice this, we see it everywhere. Let's begin with a familiar sound, the Roman bath, water trickling, steam rising, the gentle echo of footsteps across stone floors. These baths weren't just for cleansing the body. They were for gathering, for conversation, for politics, for rhythm, and beneath all of it, concrete, massive, vaulted ceilings that held heat, retained moisture, directed air, the caldarium, the frigidarium, the tepidarium, all shaped not from carved blocks, but pore forms. Because concrete made curves easy, it made space flexible. It allowed architects to think in terms of experience, not just form. A Roman bath was not a single room. It was a journey, warmth, then heat, then cold. It was story told through space, and concrete was the ink. And what about time itself? The way Romans moved through their cities? They built insulae, apartment blocks, that housed hundreds. Shops on the ground level, living quarters above. But to make a building that tall, with so many floors, you needed something stronger than stone alone. You needed core strength. So they poured it. At the center of these insulae, often hidden from view, was a vertical spine of Roman concrete, supporting staircases, carrying loads, allowing the city to rise without crumbling. It wasn't beautiful, but it worked. Concrete became the silent enabler of density, of urban living, of neighborhood, of the Roman rhythm. Bustling markets below, families above, and bathhouses just down the street. Now, picture the forum. Open air, marble columns, orators speaking beneath the sun, but beneath the marble, beneath the tiles, concrete again. The Romans didn't build top down. They built from within. Concrete first, then decoration, then narrative. They understood that beauty meant nothing without structure, and structure meant nothing if it couldn't last. And so they poured, and poured, layer upon layer, in buildings both sacred and mundane, in shrines, in storehouses, in sewers, in the very bones of their roads. Even the famed Via Appia, the Appian Way, rested on foundations of Roman concrete, still walkable, still real, still beneath us. Now let's rest again. Let your breath soften. Let your thoughts loosen, like dried mortar crumbling to dust, because there's one last place we must visit before we part from this dream, the Pantheon. We've spoken of its dome, its symmetry, its silence, but not yet of its symbolism. The Pantheon is not just a building, it is philosophy made stone. Its great dome, with the oculus at its center, represents the heavens, the divine, the unknowable, and the walls below, circular, equal in all directions, represent the earth, the ordered world, the place of men, and the concrete flowed upward to sky, from mortal to divine, unseen but essential. It is a temple where form becomes meaning, and again, concrete made that possible. No dome of pure stone could have held that shape, not without massive internal support, not without crushing weight, but concrete, lighter at the top, layered with pumice and volcanic ash, became the breath that held heaven in place. The Pantheon dome was engineered to float, not through trickery, but through careful attention to pressure, weight, and balance, a whisper of geometry held by the earth, cradled in lime, cured in time, and what's more, it is still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Nearly 2,000 years. No steel, no tension rods, just quiet brilliance, ash. Isn't that remarkable? That we, in all our modern knowledge, have not yet dared to surpass it without different materials. So what does that tell us? That Roman concrete wasn't just a convenience. It wasn't a shortcut. It was a way of thinking, of trusting time, of building for silence, of letting form grow from earth, not against it. And perhaps in this moment of stillness, you understand it too. Concrete is not simply hard. It is humble. It flows before it sets. It adapts before it holds. It listens to the mold before becoming the mold. And, like dreams, it begins as liquid, as vapor, as vision, before it takes form. So now, let your thoughts dissolve again. Let them drift. Let them pour, like lime and ash into a timber frame. Feel the warmth of curing, the quiet of settling, the stillness of endurance. The Romans used so much concrete because they needed a world that would hold its shape while people changed within it. They built for the future, not for applause, but for return, for rediscovery. They knew that someday someone would stand in the dust of what they'd made and whisper, how did they do this? And now you know, not in exact terms, not in ratios, not in lab reports, but in feeling, in flow, in rhythm, in patience. And so this story too must now set like concrete in the sun, warm, Dutchois, silent, permanent, dice, sleep now on a foundation deeper than stone. Let your breath steady like poured ash. Let your mind settle like gravel in water. And know that what would we build with care, with trust, with time may outlast empires. Good night, traveler, and thank you for dreaming with Rome. Still here, soft traveler, still listening as the last grains of lime settle into the silence, even after 6 long parts, even after wandering through vaults and sea walls, domes and markets. We are not yet finished, because the story of Roman concrete is not only about what they built, it's about what they left behind. Traces, hints, shadows of intention, and if we listen closely, if we are quiet enough, we can still hear them. So let's drift one final time back to the edge of empire, to the places beyond Rome, where its concrete was poured, not just as infrastructure, but as presence. Imagine you're standing on a hill in ancient Britannia. The wind smells of wet moss and distant sea. The land is cold, the sky wide and grey, and yet there, just over the rise, is a fortress, stone-lined, but at its heart, Roman concrete, walls that don't belong to this land, roads that run straight over soft, damp soil, baths like the ones in Rome, columns, cisterns, foundations for a world that was never born here, but brought, poured, and set. This is the reach of Roman concrete. It wasn't just used where materials were scarce. It was used to transform, to bring Roman order to places wild and unpredictable. The empire didn't build merely to expand. It built to impose pattern, and concrete was the perfect tool, not heavy like cut stone, not fragile like timber, not bound to climate or tradition. It was portable, adaptable, and loyal to the will of those who poured it. In Gaul, in Judea, in North Africa, in Hispania, Roman concrete became a language spoken in walls, arches, and aqueducts, and where it was poured, Rome remained, even after Rome was gone. Let us walk a bit further now, through the ruins of a Roman city, Leptis Magna, in modern-day Libya. Once it thrived, bustling with trade, markets, temples, baths, and still, today, in its exposed bones, we find the familiar rhythm. Bricks bound by mortar, vaults rising over tiled floors, streets aligned to the sun, and beneath it all, the concrete core. Even the desert, even centuries of wind and war could not erase the structures, because the Romans didn't build for moment. They built for function, and function, when done properly, becomes endurance, even when forgotten, even when buried, even when mistaken for natural rock. Now, sit quietly beside a ruined Roman cistern. Feel the temperature drop as you step inside. Moisture clings to the walls. Your footsteps echo softly, then vanish. This cistern, this hollow stomach of the city, once held water for thousands, collected from roofs, guided through channels, stored in darkness. It was waterproof, not by accident, but by design. The Romans used a specific kind of concrete here, hydraulic concrete, ash, lime, and clay-rich sand, formulated to resist leaks, to swell slightly with moisture, to protect its contents. They even added brick dust to reduce shrinkage, to stop cracking. This wasn't primitive. It wasn't guesswork. It was knowledge, hard-won, passed hand to hand, kiln to kiln, workshop to workshop, and this knowledge flowed with the empire itself, through conquest, through roads, through language and measurement and form. Concrete was not merely a material. It was a carrier of culture, of identity, of presence. A Roman road was more than a path. It was a signal. Rome is here. Rome stays. And concrete made that statement solid. Let us return once more to the aqueduct. Not the famous ones outside of Rome, but the hidden ones, the ones beneath. Because many aqueducts ran underground, invisible to the eye, invisible, but essential. Their channels lined with opus signum, a waterproof mixture of crushed tiles, lime, and volcanic ash. It wasn't pretty, but it worked for centuries. Some of these tunnels still carry water today, 2,000 years after their engineers passed away. And what's most remarkable, the Romans often overbuilt them. Thicker walls than necessary, heavier foundations, extra layers. Why? Because they planned for time, not for trend, not for budget, for time. And now we inherit that time. We walk upon their paths. We sip from fountains they conceived. We gaze at their domes. We study their mixtures. And we wonder, why don't we build like this anymore? Perhaps the answer is not technological. Perhaps it is philosophical. The Romans built with slowness, not laziness, but reverence. They poured concrete as if writing a message to someone centuries away. And maybe that someone was you, listening now, in the dark, wrapped in sleep, following the echo of stone through silence. That's what concrete holds, not just strength, but continuity. A slow, unbroken thought that cures across centuries. And so now, as your breath settles again, as your limbs go soft and still, imagine yourself not just lying in bed, but resting atop a Roman foundation beneath you. Pozzolana, lime, sand, memory, around you, walls poured by hand, cured by time, held together by intention. Above you, a dome of dreams, soft, spacious, eternal. The Romans used so much concrete, not because they had no other choice, but because they knew nothing else would last so well without needing to shout. So now, let us go silent too. Let the last of this story settle into you like dust into a corner. Let it hold. Let it stay. Let it shape your sleep. And if ever you wander through ruins, or pass beneath, or feel the weight of a quiet stone wall, you'll remember what was poured with care never truly disappears. Sleep well, sweet traveler, and may your rest be built to last. Back again, dear listener, and still we drift through the quiet dust of memory, along the winding corridors of stone, beneath arches that refuse to fall. Even now, after 7 long journeys into the story of Roman concrete, the silence has more to say, because this isn't only about structure or engineering or materials. It is about the strange, gentle idea that something poured by human hands can outlive empires and still whisper back. So, tonight, let's follow the final trails, the smallest ones, not great domes or towering aqueducts, humble pieces, the unnoticed, the everyday. Let's begin with a single brick, simple, reddish, unremarkable. You might walk past it in a ruin, not knowing what it holds, but flip it over, and often you'll find a name, a stamp, a mark, not the name of a ruler, not an emperor, not a general, but the name of the manufacturer, the workshop, the kiln. You see, the Romans documented their construction quietly, systematically. Each batch of concrete, each load of bricks, stamped, dated, traced, as if to say, this too matters, not just the grand vision, but the small steps, the daily labor. And that's what Roman concrete tells us, not just about permanence, but about process, because concrete is slow. Oh, you can't rush its cure. You can't skip its setting. The Romans accepted that, and in that acceptance, they found mastery. They understood that what is built slowly often lasts longer, not only because of the materials, but because of the care. Now, let's pause, not in a forum or bathhouse, but in a Roman latrine. Yes, even here they used concrete, a long bench, a trough beneath, a constant stream of water carrying waste away. It was practical, simple, shared, and all of it, from the seat to the drain, was shaped in poured mortar, lined with pozzolana, sealed with tile. Even in this most private place, there was engineering. Even in this lowliest corner, there was design, because for the Romans, concrete was not sacred, but it was necessary, and necessity, when done well, can be just as profound as beauty. Let's move again to a mile marker along a Roman road. A single post, concrete core, stone exterior, worn with age, but still legible, marking distance from Rome, hot to here, to wherever you are now. In sleep, the roads themselves, some of which lie beneath modern highways, were built in layers, gravel, stone, dirt, ice, sand, and beneath it all, Roman concrete. Why? Because roads sag, sink, twist, but a concrete foundation keeps the shape, like memory under pressure, quiet but unyielding. The roads connected cities, carried troops, moved letters, goods, ideas. They weren't just pathways, they were arteries, and they pulsed with Roman rhythm, all made possible by the slow work of fire and ash. Now close your eyes, not in rest, but in imagination. Let yourself fall into the quiet shadows of a collapsed Roman villa. The mosaic floor is cracked, but still shining faintly. Beneath it, a thick, humble bed of Roman concrete, smooth, even, level. That's what allowed the floor to hold its shape for 2,000 years. And that's the strange gift of this material. It made beauty possible, not by being beautiful itself, but by holding it, protecting it, carrying it, invisible but essential. A reminder that some things endure, not by being seen, but by being trusted. And the Romans, they trusted concrete, not with faith, but with practice, with repetition, with intention. They mixed it, not to impress, but to solve. Everywhere it was used, it answered a question. How can this stand? How can this flow? How can this hold? And now, so many centuries later, we still walk among the answers. And still, we ask the same questions. How can we build what lasts? How can we endure? What should we pour into the foundations of our time? Let's return, finally, to the silence beneath the Pantheon. Not the dome, not the columns, but the foundations. A massive ring of concrete lies beneath the earth, more than 15 feet thick. It's never seen, never admired, but without it, the dome would fall, and that is the final truth. Roman concrete teaches us that what's unseen is often what matters most, that what holds us is not always what shines, and that true strength is quiet, steady, and slow, like curing mortar, like drifting sleep, like dreams that take time to take shape. So now, let the last echoes of Rome fade softly into you. Let the dust settle. Let the arches close overhead. Let the weight of history cradle you like stone. The Romans used so much concrete because they knew everything else is temporary, but something shaped with care, set with patience, and left to rest in silence might just last forever. Sleep now, beneath domes you cannot see, on roads you'll never finish walking, inside walls poured by forgotten hands. And know you are safe, held, guided, built upon, just like the cities of old. Good night, and thank you for dreaming with Rome. Still with us, soft dreamer, still following the fading footsteps of Rome. Beneath arches, between columns, through silence made of stone. Then let us continue, not to learn something new, but to understand something ancient more deeply, because the Roman story, the story of concrete and care, has one more quiet layer, one more chamber, sealed with dust, waiting to be opened. Softly, tonight, we visit the ruins, not the glorious ones, not the ones polished for tourists, but the quiet ones, the half-forgotten ones, crumbling beneath vines, swallowed by earth, washed by centuries of rain, and yet still standing, still speaking. That's where Roman concrete whispers loudest, because these ruins remind us what the Romans poured still holds, not just its shape, but its presence. Let us begin in the hills, above the Bay of Naples, where once stood the villa of the emperors, vast at a gain decay density layer, shaped into the cliffs, now mostly gone, but not entirely. Look closer, and beneath the ruins of marble terraces, beneath broken columns and fractured mosaics, you'll find it, Roman concrete, still forming the platforms, still holding the seawalls, still hugging the cliff like a forgotten promise. It wasn't made to shine, but to stay. And it did. Walk a little farther, to a road no longer used. Its stones are uneven. Weeds push through the cracks, but dig beneath. And there it is again, that unmistakable layer, dense, coarse, unmoving, foundation no one sees, yet everyone walks on. It is in these quiet places, these unguarded moments, that the soul of Roman concrete reveals itself, because it was never about the surface, never about being seen. It was about serving, enduring, lasting longer than memory. Even in ruins, it fulfills its role, and perhaps that's the truest form of success, to remain useful after the world has changed around you. Now let's move to the deep countryside, to the agricultural estates once run by Roman citizens, far from cities, far from monuments. Here, too, they built with concrete to line reservoirs, to shape barns, to frame the mills that ground their grain. Even in these rural places, the formula was the same. Ash, lime, aggregate, water. Why? Because it worked. Because Rome wasn't built only in marble. It was built in mortar, and that mortar flowed wherever Roman life flowed, from villa to vineyard, from bath to bakery, from temple to tavern. Concrete held it all. Let us rest for a moment, in a cistern buried beneath olive trees. The air is cool here, still. Eckless, a shallow pool of water reflects light from above. You can see the walls, lined with pink mortar, smooth. Tough, unyielding. This mixture, called opus signanon, was used in countless places, made with ground terracotta and lime, waterproof, resistant to mold. It lined baths, fountains, drains, and yes, sterns like this one. And it's still here, still smooth, still strong, even after empires rose and fell, because the Romans, without modern tools, understood what lasts. Now drift again, this time into the suburbs of ancient Rome, the neighborhoods, the shops, the public spaces, and behind their facade, concrete again, but not poured carelessly, not wasted. Each wall designed to breathe, to insulate, to carry weight, to resist collapse. They even use different aggregate in different zones. Lighter at the top, heavier at the base, more porous in humid rooms, denser near kitchens. This wasn't just building, it was engineering. Silent, subtle, but exact. The material adapted to need, to climate, to space. That's what Roman concrete teaches us. Again and again, not just how to build, but how to respond to the land. To the weather, to the purpose. It wasn't just durable. It was flexible, contextual, and maybe that's why it lasted so long. Not because it was strong, but because it was wise. Let's follow one last echo to the temples now abandoned. Their statues topple, their altars empty, but their foundations still hold, because those foundations were poured with more than material. They were poured with meaning, not religious meaning, but the meaning of intent, of building something meant to remain, whether or not anyone remembers why. Roman concrete, in that sense, is like sleep. It seems still, but holds everything in place. It seems simple, but is quietly alive. It seems quiet, but listens to time. And now, as your thoughts become softer, as your breath shallow, you can feel that same silence within you, that same presence, that same endurance. Because when something is made slowly, patiently, with understanding, it becomes part of the world, not just placed in it, but woven into it. That's what the Romans gave us. Not a secret, but an example of care, of attention, of trusting time. So sleep now on a floor poured by memory, on a road made of patience, under a dome of long-forgotten wisdom. Let your rest be slow and lasting and strong. No, like concrete, like Rome, like everything built to outlive the ones who shaped it. Good night, traveler. Thank you for walking all this way. And now, gentle traveler, we return one last time, not to uncover anything new, but to walk in the lingering warmth of everything we've already seen. Because the story of Roman concrete is not a single moment in time. It is a cycle, a soft circle. Endless, quiet, unfolding slowly like ripples in water. And to finish this journey, we must look back at all the places it touched, but not with haste, not with conclusion, with stillness. Let's begin again, beneath the arches. Do you remember? The weightless spans, lifted not by steel, but by balance. Roman arches were not carved, they were shaped, formed within frames. Wow, held in place by gravity and trust. At their core, concrete, not showy, not ceremonial, but structural, reliable, calm. And even now, in ruins or restored, those arches still hold, because they were built not to resist time, but cooperate with it. And from arches, we pass again into domes, the most famous of all, the Pantheon. You've stood beneath it with us before, but did you know that its oculus, the open circle at its peak, was never covered, not even in the rain, not even in winter, because the Romans believed that what was open to the heavens was blessed. The rain fell into a hidden drain. The light cast moving patterns across the walls. The sun entered like a silent god, and none of it worked without concrete. The dome's structure shifts from thick to thin as it rises at the base. Strong, dense mix at the top. Lightweight pumice aggregated. A slow transition, measured, exact, and beneath it all, that same mixture, that same ancient slurry of lime and ash and time, holding it together, holding it up. Now, walk with us through the baths once more, where warmth hummed through floors, where echoes drifted beneath curved ceilings, where water ran gently over marble and tile, all made possible by structures hidden beneath, concrete subfloors, vaulted chambers, channels carved for heat and water. Every sensation, every touch, every footstep was supported by what lay underneath. And that's the soul of Roman concrete, not to be seen, but to serve, to disappear into the shape of light. Let's go lower now, beneath the surface, into the aqueducts, the sterns, the vaults. The air here is cooler. It smells of wet stone, of earth, of time that has forgotten how to move. These tunnels carried water for entire cities and were shaped by concrete and intention. They lined the interiors with waterproof mixes. They calculated slope and flow without machines, and they built it all by hand. bowl by hand. Stone was too rigid, brick too porous, timber too fleeting. Only concrete could take the shape of need. It flowed where stone could not. It filled gaps. It sealed pressure. It endured, and even in collapse, when roofs gave way, when columns fell, the concrete remained, like a memory too solid to vanish. Now rise again to the forums, where voices once echoed of colonnades, to the markets, where footsteps rang across tiled plazas, to the houses where laughter, argument, and quiet dreams once lived. Under curved ceilings, every one of those places was grounded in the same grey, hard Roman concrete. You'll find it in the foundations of doorways, in the columns filled with stone dust, in the vaults that still span great rooms, with no beam, no support, no collapse, and beyond the city, on the roads, do you feel them underfoot? Even now, the Via Appia, the Via Aurelia, the Via Flaminia, roads that stretch still today beneath modern wheels. At their core, concrete poured between layers of gravel and stone, carefully packed, made not to be seen, but to be trusted, and trusted they have been by chariots, by legions, by monks, by merchants, by the centuries, and by you. You've trusted this material for 10 full parts, letting it carry your imagination, letting it whisper while you sleep. So now, let us close where we began, with the question, why did the Romans use so much concrete? And now, after all this, the answer is not a formula, not an ingredient list, not even a method. It's a philosophy. They used so much concrete because they built for continuity, not for applause, not for wonder, not even for beauty, but for something that would last, something that could survive wars, earthquakes, collapse, and forgetfulness, something that didn't depend on being loved, just being needed. And they were right, because we still walk where they walk, still drink from their aqueducts, still shelter beneath their curves. We are the proof that what they poured worked, and that's the real secret. Not pozzolano, not lime, not engineering, but care, repetition, slowness, intention. Build the shot. And if you carry any of that with you now, even into sleep, then this story has done its work. So breathe. Let your thoughts settle like gravel into place. Let your worries dissolve like lime in cool water. Let your dreams rise, curved and strong, like domes poured by patient hands. Because what we build with purpose, what we shape with gentleness, and what we pour with faith in time lasts. And you, sweet listener, are part of that now. Sleep well, sleep strong, sleep slow, and may your dream ruins be as lasting as Roman concrete. Still here, silent traveler, still walking beside the echo of ancient stone. Even now, after 10 long parts, you're still listening, and so is the story, because even the most solid things, walls, arches, roads, have layers we haven't touched yet. Not just the visible, not just the remembered, but the forgotten, the buried. In this final passage of our journey, we follow the cracks, the places where Roman concrete sank into time and became part of the earth itself, because this, too, is part of the answer. They used so much of it that they couldn't undo it. It became landscape. It became geology. Let's begin below the surface, beneath modern Naples, deep beneath the city. There lies another city, ancient Neapolis, Greek at first, then Roman, and beneath even that, caves, cisterns, vaults, many of them still supported by Roman concrete, walls pressed into volcanic ash, vaulted ceilings lined with mortar, steps carved and sealed. The city grew, layer upon layer, but the foundations, they remained, too solid to remove, too useful to replace. And so modern life carries on above Roman structures without even knowing. Walk any street, you might be treading on the roof of an old concrete chamber. The past holding the present. Now drift to another place, to the harbors, to Ostia, to Cosa, to Portus, to the great trade cities of the empire. Many of their docks have long vanished above water. Waves and storms reclaimed the buildings. Wood and marble, all gone, but not the concrete. Dive down, and you'll find those same ancient piers, silent beneath the sea, salt water lapping at their sides, fish weaving between them. The sea tried to erase them, tried for centuries, and failed. Because the Romans didn't just build near the sea, they built with it. Their concrete, as we've learned, reacted to salt. It strengthened, it healed, it resisted, and soon, now, underwater, archaeologists don't just study ruins, they study the material, the tobamorite crystals, the hydrated minerals, the silent chemistry of endurance. Concrete didn't resist time, it collaborated with it, and so it endures, as reef, as rock, as ancient intention. Let's climb now, back to land, into the hills, to forgotten roads, lined with fragments of milestone markers. Many of these roads were overgrown, abandoned, covered in soil, and when modern engineers rediscovered them, they found something remarkable. The roads had shifted. Yes, the paving stones were cracked. Yes, but the base, the concrete beneath, still in place, still level, still compact, even after thousands of years of frost rain, and root. Why? Because Roman builders didn't just pave roads, they layered them 3, sometimes 4 levels, each one compacted, each one deliberate, and at the bottom, that concrete foundation, that unwavering core. They built it knowing it might disappear beneath earth, knowing it might never be seen again. But that was never the point. The point was, it would hold, now rest again, underneath a Roman villa rustica, countryside estate, nothing grand, just a simple structure for olive pressing or winemaking, not designed to impress, but to last. And yet, it had concrete foundations, cisterns, channels, pressing floors. It had waterproof linings, poured substructures, even suspended flooring. Why? Because concrete made it possible. It made farming scalable. It made storage safer. It made everything more stable. And in ruins, these villas still show us that Roman concrete was not reserved for elites. It was for everyone. It was democracy in material form, accessible, adaptable, reliable. And even after the estate collapsed, the foundations didn't. They remain, like a whisper from below, still supporting the dust above, still teaching. Now, close your eyes. Let the thought settle into you, not as a fact, but as a feeling. Roman concrete didn't vanish. It just became invisible, folded into the earth, blended with the soil, not lost, but absorbed. And that may be its most powerful quality. It doesn't ask to be noticed. It only asks to endure, to hold up what comes next. And isn't that what we all hope to do? Not to shine, not to be remembered, but to leave something that holds, that doesn't crack when the world moves. Something that listens to pressure and responds with strength. The Romans used so much concrete because they were building, not just for themselves, but for whatever would come after, even if that was grass, or dust, or you. And so, gentle listener, this story is now beneath us, layered, cured, complete. And you have walked its full length. You've rested beneath its domes, wandered its paths, stood on its roads, swam through its harbors, and now you sleep on its legacy. Let your breath be like mortar. Let your heart beat slow, like a trowel smoothing surface. Let your mind settle, layer by layer, until all is still. Because sleep, too, is a kind of structure, and dreams, like Rome, are poured softly into the night. Thank you for walking this far, for trusting the silence, for letting time speak through ash, lime, and warmth. Sleep well, sleep long, sleep deep, and may what you build tomorrow be shaped with the same care the Romans gave their stone. So, here we are, still together, still listening, and still walking through the quiet ruins of an empire, poured not with gold, but with ash and time. 12 parts, and yet the story breathes on, because when you build something slowly, carefully, lovingly, it doesn't end. It just deepens. Tonight, we travel through the last shadows, to the edges of the map. To the places where concrete met mystery, because while Rome used concrete to shape its world, there were places even the Romans couldn't fully control, but tried. Oh, how they tried. Let us begin in the east, in ancient Syria, where Roman legions built cities, Palmyra, Apamea, Bosra, places of grand colonnades, of temples and gates, of theaters carved from dust, and beneath it all, Roman concrete, imported, taught, poured. But here, the ash was different, the lime cured slower, the climate drier, the sands finer. So they adapted, they blended their formula with local materials. They didn't force the land to match Rome. They let the land teach them how to build differently, and that was the secret. Roman concrete wasn't rigid. It was responsive. That's why it spread so far. Not because it was imposed, but because it could change. In Britain, they used crushed brick. In Gaul, they added river gravel. In Egypt, they worked with dry curing. In Spain, they experimented with volcanic silt. The recipe bent, without breaking, shifted, without surrendering. Now, step quietly with us into a Roman military camp, a place not meant to last forever, but still built to endure. Barracks, walls, watchtowers, storage pits, foundations, all poured with concrete. They didn't have time to sculpt. They had to move fast, and still, they built to last, because even a temporary outpost deserved strength, not because it was beautiful, but because it was essential. Roman soldiers didn't carry marble. They carried tools and knowledge. Each legion had engineers, surveyors, craftsmen, and they knew how to mix lime, how to measure, how to cure. They could set up a fort in days, and it might last centuries. Some of those camps later became towns, then cities, and the foundations of those cities, Roman concrete, poured by marching hands, not architects, not emperors, just men doing things right. Now, we drift to one last place, to the Roman tombs, because even in death, they built mausoleums, chambers, sepulchres, some above ground, some deep beneath it, many built with walls, concrete so thick they still hold pressure from the earth above and inside. Silence, but not emptiness, memory, preservation, a belief in what lasts. They poured concrete around their dead, not to trap, but to protect, because even in loss, there was structure. Even in grief, there was design. Some tombs were grand, decorated with frescoes, gilded, lit with oil lamps. Others were humble, plain, unmarked. But in both, concrete did the same thing. It held space for the soul, for the body, for the unknown. And now, perhaps we see the answer more clearly than ever. The Romans used so much concrete because they were obsessed with holding things together. Not just buildings, not just roads, but life. They poured concrete to connect floors to walls, domes to earth, cities to empire. And through that connection, they found a kind of peace, not the peace of stillness, but the peace of coherence, of everything in its place, of weight carried well, of time moving slowly across something that does not give way. So now, as you rest at the end of this long journey, ask yourself, what does your foundation feel like? Is it strong, quiet, patient? Does it hold even when the world above it crumbles? Because that's what Roman concrete did. It outlived the storm, the fire, the rot, not the wind, and became part of the ground itself. It didn't shout, it didn't sparkle, it didn't crack when abandoned. It simply stayed. And so now, in this final breath, let your thoughts become still. Let your worries sink. Let your dreams pour into the quiet mold of your breath. This sleep, too, is a structure built slowly, layer by layer, and in the deepest part of that structure, beneath memory, beneath thought, beneath even self, there is silence, and in that silence, something is curing, something meant to last. Sleep now, and let the Roman dust settle around you, not as weight, but as comfort, as assurance that what's built well lasts, and what's poured with love never truly disappears. Still drifting, still floating gently in the quiet tide of ash and stone. You've made it far, gentle listener. But 13 soft steps into the dust, and yet, like the Roman roads, this path continues, straight, unbroken, leading into silence, because what the Romans left behind was never just concrete. It was a trail, a rhythm, a way of holding the world together without needing to speak. And in tonight's passage, we will listen more deeply, not just to what concrete held, but to what it meant. Because in every poured wall, in every cured arch, was something more than utility. There was belief. Let's begin tonight in a quiet Roman warehouse, not a glamorous place. No carvings, no statues, just rows of storage chambers, olive oil, wine, grain, garum, all packed in clay jars, stacked carefully, labeled, and the floor beneath, concrete. Why? Because wood bends, stone cracks, but concrete stays. It kept moisture out, held weight, spread pressure. It needed no attention, no tending, only time. And time, as the Romans knew, was the most powerful element of all. They trusted it more than we do now. They built slow, not to delay, but to last. And that warehouse, though long gone, left its floor behind, still level, still dry, still bearing the quiet memory of things once stored. And now we pass into the temples, sacred spaces, places of ritual, incense, light, stone steps worn by sandals. Many were built from marble, but underneath, still concrete, because divinity, however high it rose, needed a firm foundation. Concrete made the sacred possible. It let architects reach wider, span farther, shape grander interiors, without forests of columns. In the Temple of Venus and Roma, one of the largest temples in the city, the walls were faced in brick, but poured behind with heartful layers of opus cementitium, and the ceiling, once a coffeteur, held not by tension, but a patient grip of volcanic ash and slaked lime. It wasn't decorative, but it was invisible strength. Now, drift farther to the columbarium, a quiet chamber of niches, rows of small urns, ashes held in clay. The room was cool, always cool, and its walls, poured with the same material, used to hold catechumens and markets, because to the Romans, death was not different from life. It too required structure, silence, and a place to settle. Concrete was not just for the living, it was for the whole cycle, and it did not judge what it was asked to hold. Now, listen, not with your ears, but with your imagination. A quiet tap, tap, tap echoes through a Roman construction yard. Workers mix lime with volcanic dust, add water, watch it hiss and settle. They pour it between bricks, smooth it, let it rest. No one hurries. The foreman waits. The sun moves overhead. By sunset, it is half set. By morning, it will be strong. In a week, stronger. In a month, almost stone. In years, something nearly eternal. This rhythm, so different from our own, was the heartbeat of Roman building, and that's why their concrete endures, not because it was better, but because they gave it time to become better. They knew that what sets too quickly often fails too soon. Let's pause in one last place tonight, a simple Roman bridge, not one that survives, but one we know existed. It crossed a stream in northern Gaul, and all that remains now are two weathered abutments, concrete filled, barely noticeable, but still there. The wood is gone, the span has collapsed, but the side, the poured shoulders still hold. They don't carry anything now, but they don't need to. They remind us that even forgotten structures leave something behind, not just in the land, but in us. Because concrete is not just about walls, it's about the memory of intention, and that memory still sleeps beneath fields, beneath cities, beneath rivers, waiting for those quiet enough to notice, like you. And so, as we close this 13th passage, let us breathe deeply. Let us remember, Roman concrete was never loud, never quick, never cheap. It was deliberate, intimate, lasting. And though empires fall, and names are lost, and languages shift, what was poured with care remains, just as you now remain, wrapped in this story, gently enclosed, cradled by word, shaped like walls that sleep comes slowly, like mortar in a mold. Let dreams cure overnight, like vaults in spring sun, and let your rest, your stillness, be shaped with the same patience the Romans gave their stone. Sleep well, sleep deep, sleep steady, and when you wake, know that something lasting was poured tonight, not with hands, but with time. You've come so far, gentle listener. 14 parts now, and yet the story flows onward, not in haste, not to reach a destination, but like concrete itself, slow, steady, purposeful. Tonight we shift our gaze inward, not to cities, not to roads, but to the unseen choices, the thinking behind the stone. Because if we truly wish to understand why the Romans used so much concrete, we must listen to how they saw the world. They were not only builders, they were organizers of space. They believed that the universe could be measured, shaped, contained, and concrete, so obedient, so cooperative, was the ideal partner. Let us begin in a Roman inscription hall, place where stone walls held records, births, deaths, census entries, building permits, all etched in quiet lines, in Latin, structured, concise, almost mathematical, in rhythm. These were not meant for decoration. They were meant for order, and the walls that held them, concrete cores, faced with smooth stone. Why? Because the Romans understood that memory needed structure, that thought needed something to rest upon. Concrete gave them that rest, a surface for keeping track, for organizing, for remembering. Now move with us to a Roman granary, a massive vaulted chamber, no windows, thick walls, cool and dry, grain stored for the lean years, for soldiers, for cities under siege. These rooms were not made from wood, too flammable, too fragile. They were lined with concrete. The vaults above kept heat out. The walls resisted rodents. The floors shed moisture. In these quiet spaces, you see the Roman mind at work. Prepare, preserve, protect, taunt, and always build for the long haul. Concrete wasn't just strength. It was insurance, a promise to the future that something would be there when it was needed. Let's step now into a Roman lighthouse. Yes, they built those two tall towers on windswept coasts, lit with oil fires. None made with oil. Fires guiding ships into safe harbor. The Pharos at Ostia, the tower at Dover, the lighthouse at La Coruña. The Romans used concrete in their cores because sea winds batter stone, because salt eats through mortar. But concrete, especially theirs, resisted. And inside those towers, ships found guidance, not because of the flame, but because the structure stood. It had no right to last this long, and yet some fragments still remain, because concrete was not about elegance. It was about endurance, even in the storm, especially in the storm. Now rest with us in a Roman basilica, not a church, not yet, but a civic building, a hall for law, for trade, for all argument, a rectangular space lined with columns, vaulted ceilings, and at the center, the tribunal. These buildings required openness, no thick stone walls, no clutter. So the Romans did what they always did. They poured, they used concrete to create broad, airy interiors without columns in the center. Weight carried through vaults, stress distributed by arch and dome. They built not just up, but wide, and in that space, people gathered. They spoke, they reasoned, they judged. Concrete became a container for dialogue, for governance, for the work of society. Let's move again, gently, into a Roman theater, carved into a hillside, stone seats in perfect curve, stage framed with columns, and behind the structure, hidden walls of poured material. Concrete wasn't on display, but it enabled the performance, just like in the bathhouse, just like in the temple, just like in the bakery, the harbor, the library, the home, always there, always underneath, always waiting. And maybe now, after all these parts, we understand what concrete really is. Not just a mixture, not just a Roman tool, but a kind of philosophy, a way of being in the world, unassuming, quiet, unshaken, meant to hold without asking to be seen. And so tonight, as your thoughts slow, as your body softens, Let this idea settle, that strength does not shout, that permanence is often invisible, that legacy is sometimes poor, one quiet layer at a time, like sleep, like trust, like love. The Romans used so much concrete because they were trying to capture the eternal in the everyday. They didn't know how long it would last, but they built as if it might, and sometimes that's all it takes. So let your breath slow now, let your muscles rest, let your thoughts float downward like sand into mortar. You've walked far, gentle traveler, and beneath your path something still holds, not because it was celebrated, but because it was shaped with patience, with presence, with purpose. Sleep now in a structure meant for peace, and let your dreams be quietly eternal. And now, our journey through Roman concrete comes to a gentle end. We've wandered beneath domes, across ancient roads, into silence, and found strength where others might see only stone. If these sleepy stories helped carry you into rest, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a soft comment below. Let us know when you drifted off, or which part of Rome you wandered through in your dreams. And if you'd like to return to journeys like this, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us keep building these quiet places, brick by brick, word by word. Thank you for joining us. And, as always, sleep gently, sleep deeply, and remember, the quiet things last the longest. Good night.